Welcome back, everyone. This time on the Deep Dive, we're tackling a case that sent shivers down the spine of post-war Britain, the murders at 10 Rillington Place. And we've really gone in deep for this one. News articles, court documents, we've even got an interview with a relative of one of the victims. And it's a real head-scratcher because we might not be dealing with just one killer, but two.
Yeah, this one's got it all. Brutal murders, possible wrongful conviction, and it really shines a light on the state of the British justice system back then, ultimately playing a role in the abolishment of capital punishment in the UK. So buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride.
All right, so picture this. Late 1940s London. We're talking about 10 Rillington Place, this really run-down, kind of creepy terraced house, cramped apartments, everyone sharing one outdoor toilet. You can practically smell the damp.
And you got to remember, this is post-war Britain, still recovering, this sense of unease kind of lingering in the air. Forensics were nowhere near what they are today, which created a breeding ground for someone like John Christie to operate undetected.
John Christie. Now, this guy, on the surface, seemed totally ordinary. Ex-special constable, World War I vet, even held down normal jobs. But get this, our sources reveal a history of petty crime, violence against women, even a conviction for assault.
Right, and what's really interesting is the psychology at play here. See, Christie claimed he was blinded and made mute by mustard gas in the war. Turns out, total lie. He also admitted to impotence with his wife, Ethel, yet we know he frequented sex workers.
So not exactly the upstanding citizen he projected.
No, not at all. And this all points to, well, a real need for control, maybe mixed with some serious sexual frustration. Tragically, this all kind of exploded into violence.
And explode it did. 1943, he takes his first victim, a woman named Ruth first, strangled her while his wife was out. A year later, another victim, Muriel Eady, lured her back to his flat with his whole story about curing her bronchitis, then strangled her too.
It's chilling, right? And this wasn't random. It was a pattern. He even kept, trophies from his victims' pubic hair. Makes you wonder how many more victims there might have been.
Ugh, that's horrible. And he buried them in the garden, right? Just shallow graves, like it was nothing.
Exactly. This wasn't some mastermind criminal, more like someone opportunistic, taking advantage of the rundown surroundings and an overworked police force.
And this is where things take that turn I mentioned. 1948 rolls around, and this young couple, Timothy and Beryl Evans, move into 10 Rillington Place with their baby daughter. And that, my friend, is where this whole two killers thing comes in.
Oh, yeah. The Evans family's arrival changes everything. Because now it's not just about John Christie's crimes. It's about a potential miscarriage of justice that'll cast a shadow over this whole case.
So get this. A year after moving in, Timothy Evans walks into a police station. But not just any station, one in Wales, and confesses to killing his wife.
Wait, what?
You heard me right. He claims he dumped her body in the drains outside. But the police, they find nothing. Then he changes his story, says it was John Christie, a botched abortion gone wrong.
Okay, hold on. This is where the police investigation gets really messy. Instead of digging deeper into these conflicting stories, considering Christie's past, they just fixate on Evans. They don't even search the property thoroughly. I mean, they missed the bodies of Christie's other victims buried right there in the garden.
Seriously, it was a small garden. How do you miss that?
Yeah.
But they take the word of this ex-special constable, John Christie, as gospel. He seems trustworthy, reliable.
Right. And Christie, he's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, uses it to his advantage, plays the helpful neighbor, saying he heard fights, saw problems between Timothy and Beryl. Basically, he crafts this whole narrative, pulls the wool over everyone's eyes.
It's chilling, right? He's manipulating the police to cover his own tracks. And the worst part is it worked. Evans, even though he takes back his confession, he's found guilty of killing his daughter. Hanged in 1950.
And that trial, it was a sham. They used what was likely a forced confession, ignored evidence pointing to Christie, and barely even investigated the actual crime scene. A recipe for disaster, and sadly, an innocent man paid the ultimate price.
And guess what Christie does? Evans is gone, so he kills his own wife, Ethel, stuffs her body under the floorboards. Then 3 more women, Kathleen Maloney, Rita Nelson, and Hectorina McLennan, all in just a few months. This guy was a monster on a rampage.
The truly scary thing is how he just blended in. Quiet, unassuming. He even helps new tenants search for Hectorina McLennan, the woman he killed and hid in his flat. It's a chilling reminder that evil can wear the most ordinary mask.
I know, right? Living right next door to a cold-blooded killer. And to think, people probably exchanged pleasantries with him, completely oblivious. But wait, there's more. Remember those bodies in the garden we talked about? Turns out they weren't found until 1953. And get this, not by the police, but by a new tenant,
Oh, man. Can you imagine just stumbling upon that Christie's House of Horrors, completely exposed? Talk about a gruesome discovery.
And to think, those bodies were there the whole time, right under everyone's noses, feet away from where the police had been questioning Evans. You almost have to wonder if they were even trying.
It really makes you question the thoroughness of their investigation, doesn't it? I mean, we've talked about the limitations of forensics back then, but this is basic stuff. It just goes to show how easily biases can creep into these situations.
Right. Like Evans, being young, working class from Wales, maybe he was just an easy target. While Christie, the former officer, well, he probably seemed more trustworthy, right? Almost respectable.
Absolutely. And that perceived respectability, it gave Christie a certain power. It made it easier for people to believe him, to doubt Evans.
It's scary how easily we can be fooled by appearances, isn't it? It makes you wonder, what if the police had looked past those assumptions? What if they had truly investigated every angle without prejudice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's impossible to know for sure, but it definitely highlights the dangers of jumping to conclusions, especially in these high-stakes situations.
Speaking of different perspectives, we got these excerpts from an interview with Beryl Evans's younger brother, Peter Thorley. He knew both Evans and Christie. Could you imagine being caught in the middle of that whole nightmare?
It's incredible to have that firsthand account, though. Thorley's testimony gives us this really unique glimpse into their lives, the dynamics at play. For instance, he describes Evans as a pretty volatile and abusive husband, prone to outbursts and lies.
Yeah, I read that too. And I have to say, it definitely adds another layer to this whole thing.
Right. It's like, on the one hand, you've got this blatant mishandling of the case by the police, this eagerness to pin it on Evans without thoroughly investigating Christie. But on the other hand, you have these accounts from someone who knew them both, suggesting that Evans wasn't exactly an angel himself.
It's a real head-scratcher. How do you reconcile these conflicting narratives? How do you separate truth from fabrication after all these years? It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
It is, and that's what makes this case so fascinating and frustrating at the same time. But it's important to remember there are always multiple sides to every story. And sometimes the most we can hope for is to try and understand those different perspectives, even if we never get definitive answers.
Right. And it's not just about Evans either. Thorley also talks about Christie, and this is where things get really creepy. He remembers him as a nice guy, even kind of protective. Made them tea, played cards with them, like the model neighbor, right?
It's chilling when you think about it. The fact that he could be so two-faced, so manipulative, it's a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. It can lurk beneath the surface, disguised as something completely normal, even charming.
I know. It's like something out of a horror movie, right? You think you know someone, but you have no idea what's truly going on behind closed doors.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case, and really all these true crime stories, so captivating. They force us to confront the uncomfortable realities of human nature, the good, the bad, and the downright terrifying.
It's like, how do you even process something like that? Knowing someone capable of such horrific acts could be living right next door, blending in seamlessly.
It really makes you question everything, doesn't it? Who can you trust? What's lurking beneath the surface?
Exactly. And in this case, it wasn't just the immediate victims who suffered. Their families, they were left picking up the pieces, grappling with the loss and the lingering questions.
Absolutely. Think about Beryl's brother, Peter. He dedicated years to getting his sister's story heard, even after Evans received that posthumous pardon.
Yeah, and that pardon was a pretty big deal, wasn't it?
It was huge. I mean, on the surface, it was about acknowledging the miscarriage of justice in Timothy Evans's case, right? But it also kind of exposed the cracks in the foundation of the whole British legal system.
It's like, how could they get it so wrong? A man was wrongly convicted, executed based on what? Flimsy evidence, a confession that was probably coerced.
And let's not forget the social and political climate back then. Post-war Britain, there was still so much trauma, uncertainty. In a way, the case at 10 Rillington Place became a lightning rod for all those anxieties, exposing the fragility of the very institutions meant to protect people.
Right, like if it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone.
Exactly. And it sparked a massive debate about capital punishment. People started questioning not just the morality of it, but whether it was even effective.
Which brings us back to that question we started with. One killer or two? Even after all this, we're still left with more questions than answers.
We may never know for sure, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the real lesson here is learning from the past, recognizing the complexities, the ambiguities, and striving for a better, more just future.
Because 10 Rillington Place, it's not just some isolated incident, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, the potential for both good and evil that exists in us all.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of vigilance, compassion, and never giving up on the pursuit of truth, no matter how difficult or painful it might be.
Well said. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. This case, it's a tough one to shake. But it's a story that needs to be told. A reminder that justice is fragile, truth can be elusive, and it's up to all of us to remain vigilant, to keep asking questions, and to never stop fighting for what's right. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.